Can you hear this? Is that working? Well, for him to hear on the stream. Okay, we're back on.
All right, we ready?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, sorry about the delay. Once in a while we have equipment issues because it's, like I say, we use the minutes as part of our recording, so I apologize for that. Tonight we're presenting a application to rezone the State Street districts back to the original zones that were implemented or existing prior to June of 2018. So tonight we're going to propose that you can see the different maps that represent the district's outline. You can see in the hub district on the screen would be to your left is University Parkway and State Street area. That was previously C2. We're proposing that to go back to C2. There is a residential project, the PD 37, that will go back to the original zone when that was constructed. The middle one is the Arts District down by the Sarah. Those zones outlined there were existing as well. And then the city center area, you can see the different types of zones. Target, which was the PD1 zone. Some other areas, Smith's was a C3 zone. So we're proposing that they just simply go back to those zones. The other two zones, 800 North, the Canyon Parkway, you can see the zones that are outlined there, and then 1600 North, all of that area was C2. We're proposing that just go back to what it was. Any questions as far as the rezone portions or the properties that will be rezoned? As part of it, and this is difficult to read trying to fit everything on the screen, what we're proposing is to make some modifications to the 2288, which basically is the requirements that regulate portions of State Street. What we are requiring is a 15-foot setback from back of sidewalk. Right now there was a maximum setback. You could only go back 0 to 10 feet. We're taking that out, but you still have to maintain a 15-foot setback behind the sidewalk, and then your building, parking, or any configuration that an owner, developer would like to do, they would be free to do that. We are also making some minor adjustments to, let's see if I can zoom in. The 4 stars is previously here. That's a strikeout there. I don't know if you can't really see my laser pointer. So right here, there's a strikeout. That's actually moving over here because it's applicable to everybody on this, or every zone on the line. People were getting confused that they thought it was just for this particular one, so we're moving it over here. Basically, it's equal to the height of the building if it's next to a residential. So that's that requirement. It refers them down to the 4-star note, which basically requires equal to the height. So if 35 feet building has to be 35 feet back from a residential property. Then we also are modifying the overall height in a C2 zone. Currently, the C2 allows a 60-foot height. We are proposing that be changed to 48 feet. And then we're proposing setback from a residential zone, like is stipulated down here in the fine print, that it be equal, or 100-foot setback from a residential zone can have a maximum height of 35 feet. I'll have the graphic towards the end that will kind of demonstrate what I mean by that. And then there's a maximum area that you can do for an area on top of the roof that would surround mechanical equipment. That is now changed to 30% maximum at a maximum height of 10 feet. So you'll see most buildings have some type of area on the roof that encloses that. So we modified that slightly. And then most of the red line strikeouts that you see on the next page are simply related to the State Street Master Plan and the implementation of the districts. So we are proposing that they be eliminated as well. Any relation to the space open to the public or an exception to the 15% rule, those are related to the maximum setback and which are no longer applicable. So we're proposing that they be removed from the code. As Coleman pointed out, I have modified the text. So the resolution that you will sign tonight will represent the 15 feet, not the 10 feet. Originally it was 10 feet, and with the discussion with the council, they asked us to change it to 10, or to 15, excuse me. So there was a 10-foot that was still remaining, so thank you for catching that. And then just some word numbering. So this is the cross-section that is proposed. based on the code that we just went through. We will keep the 15-foot planter requirement, the 8-foot sidewalk. So if anybody comes in to redevelop their property over 10%, they will be required to flip the sidewalk, have the 15-foot planter strip and the sidewalk. The 15-foot requirement will be behind the sidewalk, and then any site layout or things basically now is allowed up to the developer, for the developer to either put the building up to the 15 feet or the one below. You could have parking up to that 15 feet or a combination thereof. If the building and part of the on the side is parking, they could do that. The other stipulation that points out is if this is a residential zone, which we do have several up along on State Street next to residential, they would have to have a minimum setback of 100 feet and a maximum height of 35 feet in that area. And the stipulation to be equal to the height still applies in that area. So if you have a 35-foot max building, it would still have to be 35 feet back from any residential building. So be glad to address any questions on the standards.
And the city's the one applying for those changes, that's a recommendation?
The city is the application. We go to the next slide. Then staff does recommend that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council.
Okay. And then this is a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay. Any question from the Planning Commission? Okay. Well, it's obviously very busy, and we want to make sure everybody's heard. So it's a public hearing. Would like to open it to the public. Please, when you come to the stand, state your name and address, and stick to the matter of this item and to the 3 minutes allowed.
Marisa Bentley, 335 West, 1780 North, Orem, former Planning Commission member. Jim asked in the pre-meeting what the unintended consequences of something like this are. The unintended consequences are getting the city sued. Sadly, most of these people did not have a problem when the State Street Master Plan was done. No one stood up. There were so many meetings over several years, displays at the mall going on to let people know what was happening, and to change this so quickly and to kick people off so that they wouldn't vote against it in the meantime is a very sad state. So I pray that you will not forward this on to the City Council.
Hi, my name is Mike Preston. I live at 59 West, 2170 South in Orem. My wife and I have lived in Orem for well over 40 years, raised our family here. During that time, I was a UPS driver for 32 years. I retired UPS. Much of that time, the majority of that time, I spent as a UPS driver in Orem, as a driver in Orem. I dare say that I've probably delivered to most of the people in this room without them even knowing it. And 90% of the houses and businesses in Orem I've delivered, all up and down State Street, all over Orem, and during that time. And my point is that I've seen Orem's development from two different perspectives. From the perspective of a UPS driver and from the perspective of just a resident. But as a UPS driver, whenever I would see a high-density housing going up on my route, it would create a panic attack. Because you see, UPS is much like government. They wait until critical mass before they do anything about anything. And for UPS drivers, they just, well, you just got another high-density housing on your route. We'll just stuff a few more packages in there until you're starting to get home at 10 o'clock every night. Anyway, that being said, I believe that the city now has reached critical mass as far as high-density housing is concerned. And the residents, the citizens of this city, the 16,000 responsible citizens that voted for the mayor, Mayor Young, and the other council members that were elected. They did their homework, they did the research, and they decided that they didn't want any more high-density housing in the city of Orem. So we're asking you, as representatives of those citizens, that you keep that in mind as you vote today, that we actually want our city management and our city government to act responsibly on behalf of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning staff, city attorney, city planner. My name is Fred Johnson. I've been a resident here in the city of Orem for over 65 years. I'm going to come from a little bit different perspective, one that I think would be a little bit more balanced, if you will. I own apartments. I'm a developer. I've done several residential, commercial, retail businesses in the city of Orem, as well as other cities. And I think this apartment high-density dynamic has dramatically changed over the last 8 to 10 years. I've been very, very concerned about it. I think it's out of control, has been. I think we're finally realizing, unfortunately, after the fact that we just can't be sustained with any more of this. The ratio in the city of Orem in relationship to high-density housing on a state level is like, I think it's like 43%. It's one of the highest statistics in the state of Utah. I'm very supportive of people wanting to live here. They need to contribute to our community as well. I think there needs to be an even balance of that. I do take exception to the first speaker's comment, this young lady. I was actually invited by the city of Orem to participate in these meetings on State Street, if you will. Started about 3.5 years ago, as I remember. And unfortunately, from our perspective, as the committees that we were on, we were very, very disappointed with the outcome and the feedback we gave. It didn't seem like there was any sensitivity or listening ears to the input that we gave about what we wanted to see. We appreciated the invitation to participate, but it seemed like it fell on deaf ears, frankly. So as a businessman, a developer, and as a resident of this city, I can give you a number of occasions. We have this situation with Midtown, went into receivership, went into different ownership. I brought it to the planning department's attention that we were very concerned about what we were seeing in relationship to the ratio of parking. And I think the handwriting was on the wall. The ownership of Midtown acquired a piece of property 300 or 400 feet from there. And their plan was and design was to allow, create a parking lot, if you will, on a vacant lot in a residential community, and to expect to have customers and residents of Midtown get in their car, drive over there, park their car, get out of their car, and navigate across three of the most busy streets in the city, some of the most busy. You've got Orem Boulevard, 4 South, and State Street. Thank you for your time. 572 South, 130 West. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Bryce Barron. I live at 475 East, 1070 South. What you're witnessing today, and I think, is a phrase that has been quoted several years ago: elections have consequences. And I think what you're seeing is the people of Orem, and sometimes this is an amazing thing about democracy and representative government, is sometimes the people are slow to awaken or don't realize certain things are happening, but when they do, they stand up and they let their voice be heard. And I think with this recent election, you're seeing that. The people in Orem are tired of the high density. They're tired of the apartment complexes. And this is why you've had the election you've had. And I think this plan is an excellent plan. And I think the attempt to reduce the density and the apartments, and especially high-rise apartments, these are things that we don't stand for in Orem. We would like to stop it where we're at. I was born and raised, except for a 10-year hiatus on the East Coast, I've lived in Orem all my life. And, you know, anybody, just last night, just driving home, going down State Street, okay, I won't use the word, well, I will use the word, what a joke. I mean, trying to drive on State Street. I grew up in this city when, and it's not just density, but I remember when, if you want to go out on State Street on any Sunday, okay, during the middle of the day, and you will see what used to be rush hour in Orem. That was rush hour on State Street in Orem. State Street was always this wonderful boulevard. You had the 3 lanes, and there were very few cars. And now the closest thing you can get to that is on any given Sunday, maybe around 1 or 2 o'clock, drive down State Street, and you might see what it used to be. Now there is just so much. Now I understand population growth, but you people and the city council have the power to control how population growth expands. And in just my humble opinion, we are extremely tired of high rises, of apartment complexes. No more. Let's keep that to a minimum. And also let's return, well, you can't return things, but let's try to control how State Street and how this city is managed. And that's just, that's why I voted the way I did in the election. That's why I'm happy we have the current mayor and city council makeup that we have, because they've listened to the people, and this is what we would, as resident, now, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I think a majority is interested in this kind of a setup, all right? Fewer apartment complexes, fewer high density. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. Are we talking about the setbacks or the high-density housing right now? Because it looks like the proposition is for the setbacks. Are we jumping topics?
It's for all of the above.
For all of it.
All the above. My name's Kathy Ambrose. I live at 315 West, 100 South. I'm concerned with the change of the density that you guys will not meet your requirement the state requires to have an MIH plan. Have you addressed that or talked about that? SB 34 state law.
No, that has not been discussed with the Planning Commission.
Okay, so you guys you're not aware, by the blank looks, you're not aware of the state law.
We
Let me
are,
interject. Staff is aware of that, and we have discussed it, yes.
Okay, so what is your solution to having moderate income housing? Because that's not, that you're taking that away.
I know this is a public hearing. We would not be engaging and responding to any questions. So please
Well,
address the subject matter. Give us your opinion.
Okay, so my opinion on the setback in the corridor is when they connect south of Orem to North Orem, UDOT with a BRT, because we all know we don't own State Street, and their goal is to connect South Valley to the north of the valley. You're not doing what you can to make the most of that transition. It's not going to stop. There's no way UDOT's going to stop in Provo and then say, okay, and then we'll just go around and start again in Linden. So you're not utilizing that to make the best of it, to make traffic better, to make people want to stop and shop here. And as far as going back to when State Street was a ghost town, my children's children are going to have different needs than the people right now. And so not planning ahead for that is disastrous. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Hello, my name's Ashton Jessup. I reside at 95 East, 100 North, Orem, Utah. My concern with this is that there's too many things lumped together that don't serve all the parties involved. It seems like more specialized and potentially breaking down some of the changes needs to happen. The presentation focused on setbacks, but it's focused on high density. But yet, in my position and my situation, I'm in a CCD residential zone that is going to be changed to R8. This is concerning to me because I purchased the home, which is surrounded by apartments and townhomes, and it's zoned currently for townhomes, which is not a high-density issue, if I understand correctly. But this change would make it so that my plot becomes an R8 residential. So I would no longer be able to put the townhomes there in the future, which would be a medium density, high quality housing located close to city center. So that is my concern, that this is a global change that is not serving all of the citizens, and it should be broken down to, like, I would like to maintain that capacity, especially because it's literally surrounded by townhomes. So, thank you.
Thanks, Ashton. Jason, is that something we could address now, or we have to keep the public hearing open until?
I can address it. Sure. We are proposing to go back to the zones prior to. We're not, bifurcating or anything like that. We're just simply taking it back to the way it was. If the council wants us to move forward with, changing certain parts, we will do that in the future.
And could he apply for a change for just his property to match the surrounding houses around him?
He'd have to have an acre and a half. So, no, there is no zone that he can apply for to do what he can do now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Sam Christensen, and also representing my mom, Elida Escobedo. And we own the property at 917 West and 917 North and 100 West. And I'm kind of in the same position that he's at. My house, on all three sides, I have townhomes and apartments, and I'm the only house that has a big lot and a really old house. We've been residents of Orem for a long time, and we purchased that house specifically because, we wanted to, again, kind of have a smaller project, building some townhomes as well in that area. And it doesn't make much sense for an old house to be surrounded by multifamily without us being able to develop that, which is going to help everybody. I mean, a new development in my area is going to, one, raise the property values of all of the surrounding properties in the area, going to create more tax revenue for the city, and it's going to create, more living opportunities for families in the area. So I wanted to see and have our point, come across that, this affects more than just, the big guy, but also the little guy, who's been working and trying to make something, with his property. And, if it goes, at least in my little area, if it goes back to single family, then, we're basically at a road's end, because we really can't tear the house down, and it doesn't make a sense to build a single family where I'm surrounded by townhomes and multifamily, and it would be low density. So just wanted to have that noted as well.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I could make a comment.
Yes.
So there is a provision in our ordinance that's called a multifamily variance. It applies in situations where a lot is surrounded. Well, I can't remember if it's 50 or 75%. I think it's 50% of its borders surrounded by multifamily housing. There's the potential for somebody to also develop multifamily housing on that parcel. I'm not sure if it would be applicable to this gentleman's lot, but I would suggest that he contact our Development Services Department to see if that might be applicable to his property.
Thank you.
Multifamily variance.
Exception. Multifamily exception.
Multifamily variance exception.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Terry. I live at 1102 North, 600 West. And I'm just concerned as we make this change rapidly on the current plan went through a lot of processes to come up with it. I don't have a problem with some of the issues that you see as being something that we need to address. But at the same time, a lot of members of the community went through helping the Planning Commission and helping the city make the choices of what were done at the past. We're now going back. Are we going to then go through a process again to see how we want to plan forward? I know a community that is not looking to improve and to grow in some ways, and I'm not saying density housing or anything else, becomes a stagnant community. And a stagnant community does not grow. And that begins to hurt our future and those that want to be here in the future. I work for a large retailer here in the city. We specialize in helping people enjoy new things. And those new things come with people moving, changing jobs, changing locations, changing homes. If we are not being a dynamic community, we are then hurting the growth of Orem and its tax base. Not everything comes from property tax. A lot of comes from sales tax. And sales tax comes from people buying things. So I just want you to concern that as we look to be what we're trying to create here in Orem is one that it's a dynamic community that allows us to see, to encourage people to move here, businesses to want to be here, so that we have potential for a city that people want to be in 20, 30, 40 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Philip Meekum, 173 West, 400 South. I want to speak in favor of the State Street Master Plan. Orem is a phenomenal place to live. It is Family City, USA for a reason. But what makes Orem great is not the buildings, it's the people. State Street itself is reached a point where it needs to be reshaped and redone. Going down State Street, walking down, running down, as I often do, I see broken sidewalks, empty buildings, empty shops, a complete lack of diversity inside of what shops and options are available for people. It needs to be redone. The State Street Master Plan that's been worked on for so long has a wonderful mixed-use development idea that would allow for residential above commercial, which would create an opportunity for people to walk along State Street, families to enjoy their time in Orem, park their car, or just walk from their home, enjoy a varied dining experience, shopping experience, entertainment experience that would allow for Orem to continue to grow for the future. I'm an Orem transplant. I moved here of my own choice along with my wife because we like it. We want it to be in a place that values family. Mixed-use development and apartment buildings do not devalue the family. They allow for young families who are looking for a place to start out and to grow to come to an area where they're gonna fall in love, like a lot of you have, with this city, stay in this city, and keep it a vibrant, wonderful place to live well into the future. I want that for my kids, I want it for myself, and we need to keep the State Street Master Plan as it's currently constituted. Please do not vote to abolish the State Street Master Plan. That's all I have. Thank you.
My name's Pam Ogden. I'm at 132 North, 200 East in Orem. I moved to this fine city a year and a half ago from North Provo. And so I'm not as familiar with what's gone on here in the last few years. But I do have 2 points. I want you to know I'm very pro-developer. That's why we have towns. It's not the city that makes them, it's developers. And I appreciate good, responsible developers. And they're necessary. I'm Marissa, I know, talked about unintended consequences of this change. And I'm just wondering if the board might, or the commission might consider something that would mitigate any liability to the city for making changes to the master plan that would severely financially impact a developer who came here with the idea that he could do one thing and now can't do it. It's a huge problem. And just as another side note, the lady who was referencing the middle-income housing, once you start restricting development in any significant ways, it doesn't do anything to help property values. And I just wanted to leave that with you and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Hawks. I live at 55 West, 500 South. My wife and I were married over 50 years ago, and our first city of residence was Orem. 47 of those 51 years we've resided in this wonderful city. Raised 7 children, and we're rooted here, and I worked in Salt Lake City. Rather than move closer to Salt Lake, we chose to remain here because of our positive experience, the wonderful neighbors that we had, the parks, and it was a very appealing place to live, such that it obtained the designation of Family City, USA. So in recent times, we've seen some serious deterioration in terms of our ability to move about. I've heard people say that it's unfortunate that their kids can't live in the city of Orem as the parents have done. And as though the idea would be that that's an entitlement. Well, there are other places to live besides Orem. None of our 7 children reside in Orem. They live elsewhere, and they come visit us, and seeing the changes that have taken place in the city, they say, why do you live there? It's not what it used to be. And at some point, it has to stop, this increased density. In our immediate vicinity, I say ours, I'm speaking for others that have asked me to speak for them. We need to get our arms around this and control the issues that have resulted from the increased traffic and growth. In my immediate neighborhood is the Midtown complex that's woefully short of parking requirements. Read the reviews of the residents that live there. They're just rife with complaints about parking. And now they're building another building that, when it's completed, will further exacerbate the problem. I'm pro-development too, and I well understand the well-spoken woman that said that we should have stepped forward and gotten ahead of this before the master plan was crafted. And I had confidence in the city officials making the right decision. It's only in recent times, when I've seen what's taken place, that I've started to awaken and to question some of these things. I'm totally in support of what's being proposed. To me, it makes complete sense. It's not a step backwards, it's a step forward.
John Reinhardt, live at 294 Daniel Drive in Orem. There were lots of things about the State Street Master Plan that I liked. The discussion about beautifying State Street, making changes or preparation for transportation, etc. There's a lot of good things I like about it. Participated in lots of the meetings. Basically, at the end, the one thing that I wasn't happy about was the 9,000 plus units along State Street and the height of the buildings. But basically, as I talked to people, city people and part of the process was, well, it's just going to happen and you can't do anything about it. As far as the numbers go, we just got to figure out how we're going to handle the numbers that are coming. So I kind of felt like we were told this is coming and there's nothing you can do about it, but let's do it beautifully. So for lack of a better word, I kind of felt those numbers were, this is what you got, and we can't do anything about it. So I'm glad that there's some thought about lowering the numbers, but the one thing I liked about the State Street Master Plan is that I knew where the growth was going. When you change this now, all the state streets going to be open up to high density due to the PD process. And I don't see anything in here that helps protect us from HD through PDs. Right now we might have people on the council and such that is against the high density, but when they leave, that may be different. I'd rather be protected through code than council. And so I would like to see some additions here that help put restrictions on PDs, what PDs can do for high-density housing. Because without that, we now moved high density out of the hubs onto all of State Street. Also, in regards to the setbacks, having 15 feet of planter box, 8 foot of sidewalk, and 15 foot of setback from the sidewalk there, I think that might be a lot to ask for a developer. That's a lot of space to give up. You know, we have this picture here on the document that was shown of a building that doesn't have that 15 foot. So I don't know how that building could ever be applied into here. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh. I just want to ask, are you guys waiting online to speak in a public hearing, or you are? Okay, come closer, would you please? So we know you're waiting.
My name is Helena Kleinlein, and I live at 103 West, 2170 South in Orem. And I want to thank you for what you are doing for the people of Orem. I have no prestigious title. I'm not a small business owner. I'm not a developer. I'm not an educator. I actually have no skin in the game financially in Orem. You would consider me a nobody in the community, but I thank you for listening to me and the myriad of nobodies who have an opinion. Thank you for listening to those of us who have been so busy raising a family or earning a living that we were not as involved as we should have been. The very first speaker is correct. We didn't get involved as we should because we trusted our local leaders to do the right thing. We did not realize that so many special interest groups had subtly taken over Orem politics. There's a movie entitled While You Were Sleeping. That was many of us. But now we're awake and we're staring at a monolith. So I speak for many in my area in South Orem that we are in approval of putting the zoning back to pre-June 2018 standards. And we're also in approval of this new planning commission that seems really quite balanced in its representation of all groups. We are in approval of a mayor and a city council who actually care what the little person thinks. We understand that Utah has a housing problem, but we also have a water, infrastructure, traffic, parking, and a special interest problem in Utah. We understand that putting zoning back to these standards don't solve all of our problems, but it does prevent Orem from becoming urbanized. We can look at plenty of urban examples in the US to see what our future would look like if we don't change course. Urbanization might solve a few problems, but the problems that it causes are a hidden Goliath, and it will change and destroy the way of life as we know it here in Orem. We can look at Chicago, Seattle, Salt Lake, and soon we can look at Lehigh to see at the future problems of urbanization. So thank you for taking a pause on the State Street Master Plan. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being fair, considerate, and responsible in your decision making. And thank you for listening to we, the little people.
My name is Jennifer Young. I first moved to Orem, Utah when I was a teenager in 1989. My husband and I have 6 kids, and 4 of those are married. 2 of those 4 have children of their own, and they live in Springville, and they live in townhomes. And I agree with the gentleman. They come to Orem to visit us and say, why do you live here still? We still like Orem. It's still our home. There's many reasons why we don't want to move away, but we see as parents, older parents with adult children and grandchildren now, seeing the reason why they would not want to live here. The middle children who are adults and not, well, one of them is married, one of them's engaged. They can't afford to live in the high-rise apartment buildings that are here in Orem. They have checked them out, they have done their shopping, and they cannot afford them. So they're still having to look for other options that are not as good. So my husband and I were not involved. We were one of those asleep also. But we have gotten fully involved in the past year. And so we are proud of our community standing up to seeing what was going on around us. It seemed like for 5 years we were driving around going, what is going on? As traffic just increased and increased and the high rises kept going up. So I think it is wise for us to take a big pause. I think it's wise for the citizens to stand up and to put new officials as the mayor and the city council to say no, to push back. I think it's wise for us to let our infrastructure catch up to the building that has already happened. And I think it's wise for us to also listen to these few people who have spoken tonight who may be exceptions to some of those new rules. So I appreciate your time. One last thing I want to leave with is something I heard this morning on the radio. So it was just that in the past year, the highest inflation was in rents, and that's expected to keep going up in the next couple of years. And there was a 10% rise in rents just last year alone. So this is part of the reason why 2 of my adult children cannot afford to live here in Orem, and they're having to look for other options. So I just want to leave that. If we continue to keep building these high-rise apartments, our children will not be able to afford them. So I don't think that it's helping. And last thing I think I want to leave out with is I'm friends with one of our Orem City policemen, and he says that the place that he visits the most are these high-rise apartments. So that's where most of our crime is coming from. So thank you. 488 North, 600 East.
My name is Wes Parrish. I live at 166 North, 520 East in Orem. We've been a resident of Orem for 45 years. And I have a very short message for you. We liked it when it was more rural. We don't like the traffic. We don't like crowds. And as far as the State Street Master Plan is concerned and the proposed zoning changes, I have this to say. If you build it, they will come. If you don't build it, they won't come. And it'll be less crowded.
My name is Jerry Chrisman. I live at 1065 South, 545 East in Orem. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to say very little. I have lived in the Provo, Orem area longer than most of you have lived on Earth. I watched Orem grow from a small farming community to the most densely populated city in the county, the 5th most populated city in the state. We fall behind Kearns, White City. I don't know if any of you know of White City. It's a town by Cedar Valley. It has a population of, let's see, about 6,000 people and less than a square mile in size. The other cities, Kearns, Midvale, Taylorsville, are much smaller in size. They're the only ones with higher population density in the state. We have almost twice the population density of Provo. Why do we need to continue this? I don't think we need more cars on the street. We don't need more high-rise apartments on State Street or anywhere else in the city. I have 9 children we raised in Orem. Not one of them has chosen to live in Orem. Thank you.
Now, is there anybody else have anything to say in this public hearing before we close it?
My name is Kira Ludwig. I live at 115 East and 1000 South. I am somebody who lives in an area that feels like it's being highly criticized. I live in an area that has mixed between single-family homes. There's multi-story apartment buildings, there's duplexes, there's home rentals, there's basement apartments, and I love it. It's beautiful. It meets a variety of needs, and it allows me a variety of people in my life. And I feel like some of the ideas about some of the words that were used, urbanization and high density, are being used in a harmful way. And I think that changing plans based on harmful ideas is not going to lead our city to a good place. The plans that were made and approved in 2018 were well researched and approached with care from professionals to meet the needs of our growing city. There were hours and multiple opportunities for citizen input. And the plans were approved, and I feel like the rapid way in which they're being deteriorated is unsavory and unfortunate. And I think it's too quick to be thoughtful about meeting the diverse needs of a diverse city. We're blessed to live between 2 universities. And yes, that means that we no longer live in a city full of orchards where there's no traffic, but we also still live in a city with a lot going for it. We live at the shores of a lake, we live by a river, we live at the mouth of a canyon. We have highly desirable businesses that come to our area, and I think that the 2018 master plan addressed meeting the needs of a city that's growing because it is desirable. And we can't go back to a city of orchards. We can't, but what we can do is address the needs. We can create a variety of housing options that meet the diversity of our city. We can beautify our city. We can address the traffic. We can create a city center and prioritize sustainable options like transportation. These issues were professionally addressed in the 2018 State Street Master Plan, and I hope that you reconsider the drastic changes that are being made and recognize that the changes that are being made are not just for the citizens of today and the citizens of tomorrow. And I say that as likely one of the youngest people in the room, which I think makes my opinion significant. I have a young family and I plan to stay here, and I think the way we see that needs to be addressed. And I value and I think that the ideas of the citizens who have been here for a long time also need to be addressed, but in compromise with things that have already been approved. Thank you.
Keith Walker, 1969 North, 600 West. I've lived here for 65 years. Just a couple things. I want to thank the commission for what you're going through now, and also for the city council and the things that they've gone through. I've sat through these meetings now for the last 5 or 6 months, not too many of these, mostly the city council. But I want you to thank you what you're doing. The UPS guy, I'm gonna go quick on a couple topics. The UPS guy brought up some stuff. I happen to be in the FedEx business with my kids, and I spent Sunday, because I had 3 employees not show up Sunday, in Provo, helping my kids, and I commend the council for the parking. The parking, if you want to look like Provo and East Provo, and wall-to-wall cars parked on down on the streets and nowhere to go, just be careful. So I commend the council for adding the parking with this. The second one, I come to Orem later in the day, and I'm down in the apartments above Sand Hill and around the temple, and it's a nightmare with addresses. So I'd encourage that. Orem City's Family USA, and I'd encourage us to stay that way. I've said in these meetings a couple times to the council, the rest of the cities will build the apartments and the high-rise everywhere they go. I'm not against apartments. I have family. I'm going to own apartments in my life, but we don't need great big ones, and those other cities will build them. Let's keep it houses in Family USA. And I believe that State Street is kind of an ugly street, and always has been, and it will. And some of the things in this master plan originally are good. But when you look at the whole thing, it will create more havoc than we think we have on State Street now when you start trying to put bike paths, which is good, don't get me wrong. But just when you look at the way it was laid out, it'll be a nightmare. And then the other thing I just want to share, and I'm not trying to pick at the city either, because I think they feel like I have, but the businesses are, and I'm not trying to, but the businesses around, but you'll hope you see my point. The businesses that have property along State Street, the small businesses, the way it's set up right now, by and large, they cannot develop or improve their businesses because it has to go into a conglomerate to be a big sections, and you're trying to get big pieces of property together to be developed in bigger properties. And so they can't do anything with it. And so what that has to be is developers like Woodbury or somewhere, and I'm not against them either, just about those names, just because that's the type it has to be. But in order to do that, the city becomes the property manager, or they become the way the property is developed, the way it's set up right now, because the independent can't do it. So the big guy has to buy this piece, that piece, and this piece, and because the city won't allow the independent, so now the city is controlling how that is developed. And I think there's some error in that thought process, and maybe most people don't get that that's really true, but I think it is happening in the way it's presented now. I encourage you to go back to the way it was and work with it as we go forward. Thank you.
Well, before we close the public hearings, anybody else have any comments? Would you please come to the stand, state your name and address? I know, it's Ashton Jessup. We have stated the format.
Ashton Jessup, 95 East, 100 North. It's fun hearing all the different scenarios here, and I resonate with lots of them, you know? And it's like, I love the people that we have here, and that's what makes it a great place. My question is there no middle ground? We've got a city that's going to continue to grow with people, but we're not providing for it. So that means that in 15 years, I'm going to have to sit in that seat, and I'm going to have to undo a whole bunch of things, or I don't know what, like, I just, with my specific situation and his, and we're the little guys too, but we can't do what we're trying to do. We can't make this city a better city because we're just trying to go back to a digressed model. And if we have to go back to the digress so that we can revamp and go forward, then great, but there's got to be a middle ground here, I think. So that's my last take.
Thank you. Okay, well, with this, we have one more.
Welding, 1234 North Gilman Circle. I'm a builder and have worked with the city for quite a while, but I've spent the last probably 15 years in the Bay Area kind of observing and working there. And one thing I have observed, that there are some cities that seem like they let growth get out of control, and it might be because of just they don't have this process of citizens' involvement, and the city and developers kind of take over. But I've noticed other cities that are, one in particular, Orinda, California, is right back in the middle of a pretty populated area, has been able to maintain its personality. Doesn't seem like it's growing out of control. It's about the same that it's been for about 20 years. And so the one thing I would like to say is that I think we as a city can decide how we want to be. And it might not, every individual in that city might not agree with it, but we can decide whether we want to be remain. It doesn't seem like we're going to remain like we were back in the orchard days, but we can kind of restrict growth so that we can remain a community that has more of what they call the small town USA. And so I think we can do that. I think that's why we have government. That's why we have a planning commission, and that's why we have people. The people can actually have a voice. And what I've learned in the past is there are variances, and there are things that make sense within the overall plan that the city has been willing to work with everyone so that they can perhaps, be able to make it work. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with this comment, close the public hearing, and well, if we heard from you already, thank you. Oh, you called me on it. You're right. Come in, please. Thank you for bringing that up.
I just want to say that I think that the new plan that is in place, we went to the planning meeting that was just across the hall a few weeks ago. We really were happy with it. We think that it is the happy compromise. We feel like it is going to it's going to beautify State Street. Since 1986, when I was here, it has been ugly. The plan, as I understand it, is to make it beautiful with more plants, trees, bike lanes, make it a little bit more friendly for the people who are already here. And I love what the last gentleman just said too. I was just thinking of Solvang, California. And that's just a beautiful little spot where you can take a break from the crazy cities. And why can't we be that? So I agree. I think that the proposal, the new proposal that has just been come across, is the happy win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Earl, a question. I haven't closed the meeting yet. A question I have is, what is our obligation to continue taking comments, and how long? As long as we need to? Is there something we can change? Or
I think you can set a reasonable limit, but my guess is we're probably pretty close to the end.
That's what I guessed. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to. I don't want to see somebody trying to give us a comment and say no. So please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nancy Jeffries. We've lived out here for about 42 years. Those asking now for, can't we meet at middle ground or whatever? This plan you had, it's been in place for 4 years, and there has definitely been a lot of changes. So, let's not suggest that nothing's been done, so can't we meet in the middle ground now? I was appalled the other day driving down Orem Boulevard. That's my favorite place, so I don't have to drive on State Street. And I thought, down there on 400 South, I thought, we're even destroying the sky. We can't even see the mountains, from what has happened there at 400 South. I feel bad for the people who live west of that, where so much high-density housing has gone on. And it seems almost a crime that there is no parking. I've been down there to True Religion restaurant. My gosh, you can hardly get in, So, anyway, I would say enough is enough. And I'm really glad that you're going back to what it used to be. You can't do anything about the high density that's in place right now, but I'm voting for, please, stop. Especially when these people are saying that their grown children now who grew up in Orem, they can't afford to move into the high-density housing. Well, who is going to live there? Is it people just who work in Salt Lake and have no children, and so they do have, you know, a roof over their head? I'm not sure how to correct the problems, but we definitely already have too much high-density housing in my estimation, so I would vote for please stop. Thank you. My name is Nancy Jeffers, 1691 North, 50 East. Thank you.
My name is Dennis Clark. I live across the street at 137 East, 100 North. Right across from me is what is becoming a new road through the parking lot. We bought that house in 1979. We moved in June. In that time, we raised 6 children, 4 of whom we brought with us. What that meant to us was a very interesting experience, because when we first moved in, all this was athletic fields, and between here and what is now the senior center was dirt. So I've seen a lot of changes in Orem. I do not believe that any of those changes have necessarily been for the worse. We bought that house for $56,000. If we were to sell it now, according to some of the websites that make such estimates, it would be around $350,000. I don't know who could afford to buy that house. What that tells me is that a lot of what is happening here tonight is extremely temporary, because one city council cannot bind another. In the other plan, that whole row of houses from State Street to 2nd East was zoned so that if the developers could persuade owners to sell, they could put in 3 or 4 or 5-story apartments. The lots are deep enough for parking behind there. It'd be like the Thane Apartments directly across the street here. I don't understand what's going to happen to Orem any better than any of the rest of you do, but I think it makes no sense to try and consider and kid ourselves that these things can't be changed. I don't see any way for Orem to continue growing with the kind of housing prices now coming up, except to move to high-density housing. So I would urge you to stay with the other plan. It seems to make more sense to me. Thank you.
Okay, we now close the public hearing section of the meeting. But I do have a couple of questions that I couldn't help but to just would like to get some answers for, if we could. As far as Mr. Jessup, and I'm sorry I didn't get your name, sir, you're presenting your mom on 100 West. You guys said there could be an exception for getting their homes.
Yeah.
It's a townhome.
Well, I'll let Jake.
It's a case-by-case basis. It depends if they meet the requirements. There are 4 options. If they're totally surrounded or if there's a certain percentage of commercial, it just depends. There's a lot of properties that don't qualify. So we'd have to look at it and then see that if it does or doesn't. It may or may not. So that's something we'll have to investigate. This would not have a bearing on whether he could or couldn't qualify for that.
Okay. And I also heard another comment about how traffic will be addressed. Do we know if how does the State Street Master Plan address the traffic as it is right now?
State Street Master Plan doesn't really affect traffic, right? The majority of traffic that we see is not due to high-density housing. It's due to people driving through the city. And I'll let Sam Kelly address that. But the majority of the traffic you see during peak hour is not from housing in Orem. It's from people come from Pleasant Grove, Provo, and those types of things.
Just to make a comment too, I think what I remember of the State Street Master Plan pertaining to traffic and transportation is that in these hub areas, in these districts, we wanted to have some other types of connections. I think we had anticipated a street to be like at 200 South that would connect Orem Boulevard to State Street. So in those districts, we tried to create more of a grid network because State Street is a hard street to work with because it's on an angle, and it's hard to have a grid network system within the city when you have this large road that's cutting right through the middle of it. So part of the plan with those districts was to encourage other streets to create somewhat of a little bit of a grid around these intersections. So what it would do is it would, with the thought that it would alleviate traffic and transportation issues at the intersections, because when you don't have enough connections, and the way I guess the best way that I can relate this to it is that typically everyone has a home and they typically have two or three doors. Well, with the way State Street is, the way our intersections are, essentially we're taking our home and we're restricting it to one door. If you have different ways to access, then there's going to be less use in that one spot. So with the State Street Master Plan, we were trying to account for adding some extra doors, extra streets that would connect to some of these other collector roads around, so we wouldn't have all of that traffic going right to the intersection and concentrating and focusing that. So essentially, with going back to the other zoning, we wouldn't really have a mechanism if someone were to come in and we couldn't really ask for a connector road from State Street to Orem Boulevard.
And
in that one case.
Does that change that you guys are proposing for us to forward the recommendation? Does it promote more businesses instead of high density like it would?
It does promote, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what does it?
It's a commercial zone, so yeah.
Promote having more businesses on State Street.
I don't know if it would do more or less. It would just allow business to come with no high density.
Does any of the Planning Commission members have any questions regarding this? Yeah, the PD zone. What could we do with the PD zones? I know that I can go back and find your name.
No, right now, PD zones are not permitted.
PD zones are no longer permitted.
So there are permitted in certain areas that are already zoned, let's say M1 or M2, which is west of I-15. Somebody could come and request a PD zone in the middle of an industrial zone.
Mm-hmm.
But anywhere along State Street or any residential zone for that matter, PDs are not allowed. So the fear of somebody saying, well, we're going to now push high-density housing in residential zones is not accurate. We will not accept applications in residential zone currently.
Thanks, Madeline. I know when we go get loans, at least FHA, there must be owner-occupied loans, which kind of allows more people to own their homes, and that protects them against the rising rent inflations when they have a mortgage. I don't know if that's legally possible for our city to request homeowner occupied.
The only requirement we allow for owner occupant is if they have an accessory apartment.
That's the only one.
There's no prohibition of somebody being an absentee landlord and owning a home. That's allowed in pretty much anywhere in this.
Anywhere, okay.
So to further comment on that, that's actually not something we could legally do in terms of requiring a development to be owner occupied. The reason for that, I'll bore you with this a little bit, is because the right to rent your property is considered a constitutional fundamental property right. So you can't infringe on that by saying you're not allowed to rent your property.
I see. Yeah. That's great. Okay, well, if there's any other questions, I mean, we heard from, I lost count after 17. approximately more than 17 people, and I wrote down how many were in favor and how many against. So I think go ahead and make the motion. Yeah, I would love to have any comments from Planning Commission.
Appreciate everyone who gave their input. I certainly felt like when the State Street Master Plan was developed, I opposed it and expressed my opinion. I felt like my opinion was heard, but I also felt like it was a predetermined answer and that it was ignored and not taken seriously. And some ways we're kind of to that point in a different way. That in my mind, the difference being is that this is what the people in Orem want. And I've done a study of, I was having a conversation with former council member Mark Seastrand. We looked at a table of all the cities in America over 20,000 people and what percent were in rental, or what would be considered rental or apartments versus single family homes. And the numbers were anywhere from 90 to 10. And what it made me realize is that you get to choose. And I think our citizens have made a choice in terms of what we want. I do know that somewhere down the line, a council maybe in 2028 is probably going to need to say, we need to look at some of the ways that State Street may need to change and improve and grow, because we can't, nothing ever does stay the same, and it will. And but for now, I think we've got what I consider. I think we're trying to go back to doing what I thought the citizens wanted when the State Street Master Plan was created, even though they didn't express it all the way always, and certainly what we want now. I hope the council will use common sense in dealing with some of the areas. I feel like Orem is very much a common sense city, and if there are problems this creates, and it creates a situation that doesn't fit, I'm hoping we can find some way to make sense there. I know everyone's not going to be happy about where we are, and yet there is a fundamental nature of Orem that is unique. I've lived in many cities in North America, and I've visited cities across the world, and Orem is a unique city. And I think what this does is it preserves that uniqueness. And we ought to be grateful and proud that we can do that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat too much of what's been said. I think a couple things that are important that I want to make sure everybody understands. 4 of us on the commission were sitting there just a couple months ago. And we applied and we got involved just as we vote and all of those things. I want to make sure everyone understands that the comments that have been made, I listened very clearly to all of them. Before this meeting, we received a packet, I think it was 107 pages of documents and maps and a lot of the public comments from the open house that was held a couple weeks ago. And I read through every one of those comments. And to the comments tonight, I don't disagree with a lot of them. And yeah, is there middle ground? That's the question. I think there's some good pros and cons to the State Street Master Plan as it was proposed a couple of years ago. I think there's some good pros and cons to the action that we're looking at tonight. One thing I want to remind everyone of is tonight, the Planning Commission is considering this as to sending a positive or a negative recommendation to the City Council. I know the City Council has seen the feedback from the public meetings. A couple of the members are here and have heard all of this feedback tonight. That's the night that the vote will happen that will decide one way or the other. We're making a recommendation. But I hope that everyone understands the more you get involved in this process, the more your voice can be heard. And I just want to make sure everyone knows I appreciate being involved in the process and what we're doing. I think that's what I had. Thank you.
Since I'm probably in the minority, I just wanted to explain my position a little before we vote. Well, just probably a couple of the major points. I do think that I mean, we obviously have a housing shortage, all of Utah, including Orem, and putting more restrictions on and making it even harder to build more housing doesn't seem like the right thing to do to me. Doesn't seem to me like the right thing to do right now. Also, I'd like to challenge the notion that there's this, I think it's a false dichotomy, high-density housing or protecting our neighborhoods. I have an extended family member who lives in a detached single-family home neighborhood close to UVU, and 25 years ago they loved the neighborhood, and there's nothing wrong with what's happened to their neighborhood, but they've actually bought property in Idaho. There aren't families there anymore. All the detached single-family homes are student rentals now, and a lack of high-density housing has had an effect on their neighborhood. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Students need to live somewhere, but it makes it less attractive for families, and that's because there's not enough high-density, rentals and student housing. So I think that's kind of that's more rhetoric than fact, that high-density housing is the opposite of protecting neighborhoods.
Yeah. Any other comment?
Just want to jump on Jim's comment and thank every single one of you for being out here tonight, for speaking up and making your voice heard. We needed to hear what you had to say to help us as we are deciding how to vote. So again, thank you so much for every opinion that was shared.
Okay, well, I appreciate all the, yes, Madeline, hi. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I just want to say, along with Jim and Amber, I've really appreciated hearing this. I've been involved in the Straight Street meetings and listening to them. And I usually try and listen and be like, okay, where's common ground? Where is their consensus? And it really pretty much falls down to, we want State Street to look better. And everyone has a myriad of ideas, and that's fine. That's great. But we have to do something. And even us setting a positive recommendation to the City Council doesn't mean this is the be-all, end-all. This does not mean that State Street is going to be this for the next 100 years. We probably won't even make it to 2028 before we start amending it. We probably will make it to later in 2022. But it's a place, in my mind, it's a reset. It's a chance to pull back and say, we know commercial zones. We know how they work. Developers know how they work. Might be an opportunity for people who have been unable under the current State Street Master Plan to develop their properties and do things that they haven't. There's opportunity there. No decision that we make is going to make everyone happy. That's just the way it's going to go. But continue to talk to the City Council. Continue to reach out to them and let your voices be heard like they were tonight. And I really do appreciate hearing from everyone.
Any other comment? Anybody? Okay, well, thank you so much for all that spoke today. I do want to just briefly address a few things. We had a period of time where we had quite a few student housing go in and high density that we have seen the city come back and backtrack on some of the requirements that they allowed them to do. And then they came back and asked for more parking. We've had issues with those. And I don't think that this is here's abolishing the entire State Street Master Plan. I think it's just putting a pause on what's going on until we see what can we do to reconsider. Instead, I mean, it does look like a blanket, but also the State Street was a blanket where it did not align with most of the residents that voted for the council or the mayor to make the changes. So this is again, we're not here, this is not the final decision. However, what I believe is the city has done a great job going back and reconsidering the parking, and as we addressed that in the last meeting, and that mainly because they've seen the effect of making fast decisions without considering talking to the developers and how much parking they need. Again, this is mainly for us to forward a recommendation to the council, and I know that, again, I got involved in the Planning Commission only because I own businesses on State Street that were heavily affected by the State Street Master Plan, and yes, I was also unaware of most of it because I had to run 2 businesses for a long period of time every day. So it's I think this is just a recommendation, and we'll open it for a motion.
I move the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to amend Section 2253A and the zoning map of the City of Orem by changing the zoning of properties within the hub district zones, the arts district zones, the city center district zones, the canyon crossing district zones, and the North Village district zones to the C1, C2, C3, R6, R6.5, R8, PD1, PD30, PD37, PD39, and PD40 zones, and amend portions of section 22.8-8 pertaining to zone development standards along the State Street corridor.
Second.
And we'll take a vote. Melvin?
Aye.
Aye.
Barry?
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now we move to the minutes and refusal, right? Do we, have you all had a chance to review the minutes? Okay, and can I move forward to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes from the January 19th, 2022 meeting.
I second, Madam.
Aye.
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 And I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Move to
Second.
adjourn.
Jim? Aye.
Move to adjourn.
Ryan have anything?
Oh, Ryan, do you have anything to say?
Guys, just welcome to the new planning commissioners and thank you for your service. You will find at times it's a very thankless job. You work for free. We bribe you with food. But welcome to the group. I also would like to just voice our appreciation for our 4 planning commissioners that are no longer with us. They did serve dedicated, came to meetings, and served for a number of years. And so I just want to publicly recognize them and thank them. So that's all I have.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Yeah, move to adjourn.
Second.
Go ahead.
Aye.
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 Thank you, everybody.